Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 6 of my Samsung Mobile SDK tutorial. Today we're going to be focusing in on the Samsung S Pen, how to create and set pen settings. We're also going to review how to define different button states, which we're later going to use. By later, I mean in the next part of the tutorial, we're going to create a toolbar that will work in any Android device. And then I'm also going to cover the basics of setting up and creating a Paint app. And this, of course, is brought to us because of the Samsung Smart App Challenge. There's all kinds of information in the description under this video on how 12 people are going to divide up $1.1 million. Also, if it's still November 2013, there's also information below on how I can help you win a Samsung Galaxy Note 3 or one of 3 Galaxy Gear watches. Okay, so let's take a look at what our app's going to do. On purpose, I made this very simple. What it's going to do is, if you click up here where the little pen icon is, it's going to open up pen settings. And then you're going to be able to come in here and switch between all of these different possible pens. You're also going to be able to change the stroke, in some situations the opacity, and you're going to be able to pick a color, and then you're going to be able to draw something on the screen. Seems really simple, but there's going to be a lot in regards to how this button is going to react whenever we press on it, and also opening up the settings panel, and a whole bunch of other different things. So let's just jump right into the code. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is handle our layout, and we're going to use a generic linear layout for this whole entire layout. And you can see if we switch over into the graphical layout, exactly what it looks like, basically like nothing. So what we have to do is put a button up here. This button's also going to have to react to button clicks and change the images and so forth and so on. And then we need an area inside of here, which is going to be a frame layout with a relative layout inside of it that we're going to be able to draw on. So first, let's come in here and let's think about how we're going to put together a toolbar. The very first thing we're going to have to do, however, is come in here and type in tools and then context. And like I mentioned before, basically what this is going to do is define which activity the layout is associated with when the app first starts up, because we all know that it's possible to have multiple activities all use one layout. So that's what this is used for. And I also mentioned it also helps the layout editor know what theme is going to be used. So we're going to be using pen sample 1-2-pen settings. And you can see up here, pen sample 1-2-pen setting.java. So that's what that is. Then what we're going to need to do is to actually create our toolbar. It only has one button on it, but really we're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again if we're going to be using more than one button. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a linear layout. And then inside of this, we're going to give it Android ID is going to be equal to, and then we want this new ID to be created for us. So we're going to go ID, and we'll call this tool menu. And then the width and the height, one's going to be match parent, the width that is. And then our height is going to be wrap content. And there we go. And then of course we're going to have this other linear layout here that's going to close off everything. And then inside of this, what we need to do is create room for the background for our button as well as the foreground or the icon itself. To do that, we're going to use an image view. And then I'm just going to copy this because we're going to use both of these again. The ID for this is going to be pen button. And it's kind of interesting how we are able to handle different states. This is going to be match parent. And this is also going to be wrap content. We're going to want to put in a margin. So we're going to say layout margin equal to 1 DIP. And then this is the interesting part. We're going to come in here and go Android and define what our background's going to be. But the background's actually going to be another XML file that is going to use different images depending upon the state of the button. So we're going to go selector tool BG, and then we're going to go Android source is equal to, and this is going to be another drawable, and this is going to be selector pen, which is going to also be an XML file. And then we can close this off. Now let's first take a look at selector tool BG. That's going to be our background. Background, that's what it stands for. So if we jump in here, you can see it's an XML file. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to open up different images depending upon if the button is currently selected or if the button is currently being pressed. And it's going to define false, 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 true, true, false, true, true. So it's going to handle changing the background for our button depending upon different states. Then all we need to do is go inside of here and reference the background images. Remember, this is the background part of the button that we want displayed depending upon when the user clicks on it. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to use these guys right here, Tool, IC, Area, BG, Press, Center, Select, Dim, and so forth and so on. And if you want to see what they look like, they're basically just blank little squares, see? And then they're going to be stretched into position. And all of them are exactly the same. Well, the color's different, but the shape is the same. And for our background images, we're going to have a total width of 22 pixels by 46 pixels in height. And then whenever we create our little icons for our pen, they're going to be 44 pixels in width and 44 pixels in height. However, the background images are actually going to be stretched into position. Okay, so basically we just need to go into Drawable and define what background images we want to have inside here. So I already showed you where they were. So we just threw them all in. Tool, IC, Area, Center. If we come over here, Tool, IC, Area, Center. Let's open it up again. See? That's going to be the default background when nothing's being pressed and nothing is being clicked on, as you can see right here. And then we just define whatever the background is in the situation in which it is being pressed, but it is currently not selected, and so forth and so on. So that's all we're going to do, but it's kind of neat that we can go in there and change states just that easily by referencing another XML file. And then we're going to go into the pen also. Let's jump back here for 1 second. See, the pen is going to reference selector pen right here, and here is selector pen.xml. Then we're going to come in here and define all the states by referencing the drawables inside of this. So if we throw all those back in there, and you can see here, Tool IC Pen is going to be the default state. And then we can come down inside of here and go Tool IC Pen. It's a ping file, and there it is. There's your icon. So that's how easy it is to go in and create different states for a toolbar system inside of Android. And like I said, this is the way it works for any Android device. This thing here specifically doesn't have anything to do with Samsung. So now we'll jump back over into Activity Pen Setting.xml. And inside of here, we're basically going to define an area in which we're going to be able to draw. So inside of our frame layout, we're going to put a couple different settings. Let's just copy this stuff again so we don't have to type it in. Paste that in, and we're going to be referencing these inside of the code. And for our frame layout, this is going to be called SPen View Container Match Parent, and this is also going to be set for Match Parent. And then inside of this, we're going to put a relative layout, and it will have an ID of SPen View Layout in match parent, and then finally we're going to close off our relative layout, and we're all set. So that's all we need to do in regards to setting up the XML file for our little Paint Pen Settings application. So let's file save that, and then jump over into the actual application and start building it. I know I've gone through a couple of these already in the past, but I'm going to review them very, very quickly so that you know exactly what each of these libraries do. This guy right here, which is just an exception, is basically going to make sure that the device that we are running this app on is going to support the Samsung Mobile SDK. And in this situation, if you didn't watch the very first part of the tutorial, what I did was I created all of these different tests inside of here, and a whole bunch of different dialogues that popped up on the screen to alert the user to any errors. In this situation, rather than typing all that out, we're going to instead keep that in this little class called SDK Utils, and this is a Java class. Okay, so that's basically what that exception does. Then we have our SPen library here, which is going to initialize and verify that the SPen is available. Then we're going to have SPen NoteDoc, which is going to allow us to manage SPD or SPen data files, and it's going to load as well as save these SPD files. And it's also going to be used to add and remove page docs as well as attach external files, which brings us to page docs. Basically, a page doc is just going to contain all the data and all the objects inside of the page, and it's going to allow you to add additional objects and delete objects and retrieve them and change layers and objects, and also provide general settings for the page document in general. Then, since we are going to allow the user to change the color and the stroke and so forth and so on with the pen now, we have to create a listener that's going to be used whenever the color is changed. And basically that's going to happen anytime the settings window is opened up in general. This guy right here, SPen Surface View, is going to allow us to edit the drawing surface with either a finger or an SPen. SPen Settings Pen Info is going to store all the settings currently for the pen be it color, pen class name, as well as thickness. This guy right here is a reference to what I just showed you. Basically what it's going to do for us is just create all the alert boxes in situations in which the device being used can't run the app, or there's no S Pen available, or the app needs upgraded, or whatever. Like I said before, I covered that in the first part of the Samsung tutorial. And then finally we have S Pen setting pen layout, which basically provides methods for working with the pen settings layout. And those are all the libraries we're going to need to be able to create this guy. So now basically I need to create all the different classes we're going to need to use inside of the application. So the very first thing I'm going to create here is a context, which just like I said before is just going to provide basic access to different application resources, as you're going to see as this tutorial continues. And then we're going to have to, of course, create our S Pen NoteDoc, PageDoc, and Surface View. So S Pen NoteDoc. You can almost think of these guys as if they are layers on top of the application. So like I said, the surface view is going to basically handle whether an S Pen or a finger is being used to draw on top of a page document, which is going to hold all the objects, and then the NoteDoc is going to hold all the pages. And then we're also going to come in here and get the object that's going to provide all of our methods for working with the pen settings layout. And then also we're going to come in and create our image view for our pen button image. Okay, now we have everything defined. We're going to go inside of on create and basically set everything up. So first thing we have to do, of course, is reference the layout that we'll be using with this activity. Our layout, activity pen setting. Let's just find that. There it is. And that's the guy that we just created. Then we're going to need a reference for our context, which is just going to be this in this situation. We're going to track whether the S Pen is going to be used with this application or not. And we're going to set it as false to start off until we figure out that yes, we can use it. We're going to have to create an S Pen object. That was easy enough. Then basically we have to come in here and try to initialize the S Pen. And if it doesn't exist, then we're just going to trigger an exception, which is going to be handled by SDK utils up here. To initialize it, we just call SPen package initialize. Pretty easy. And then this is going to be passed inside of there. We could also pass in the context, but whatever. And then we're going to set the value for whether the S Pen feature is going to be enabled or not. And we can do that by calling SPen package, our little tool here, and then is featured enabled. And we're going to pass in S Pen device pen is how we reference that S Pen. And there we go. And now since we ran that, we're going to have to catch our great big giant huge exception if we need to, which is this guy right here. Copy, scroll back down, paste that inside of there. And if we triggered this exception, we're going to call SDK utils.process unsupported exception, and then pass in the context as well as the exception itself, and then check if it's equal to true. Like I said, I'm not going to go through exactly what the SDK utils does. It's all covered in part 1 of this tutorial. And then we're going to say return. So handle that exception if that comes up. And then we're going to throw in a just general sort of exception catch here. Exception E1. And in this situation, we're just going to pop up a toast on the screen, make text, and we have to pass it the context as well as the message, which is kind of a generic message. And then we're going to reference how long it's going to stay on the screen. And then finally, call show to show the toast. And there we go. We could also print out a stack trace, so we'll be able to hunt down this error and eliminate it. And then finish is basically going to kill the application. Okay, so now that we have that all set up, it's time to initialize our layouts. So I'm going to call frame layout, and this is a reference to these guys. Let's scroll way down here, these guys right here. So frame layout, and we're going to go SPen view container is equal to cast it to a frame layout, and call a find view by ID, which is going to be r.id. And it's going to be SPen view container, this guy right here that we created previously. Now we're basically going to do the same thing for our relative layout. Paste that in there, and let's just call a little relative layout. And this is going to be SPen view layout. Change this to relative layout, and then change this to layout. Okay, so we have both of those layouts all initialized. Then of course we have to create the SPen setting pen layout. So, and this is going to allow us to go in there and change the settings for our pen. And this is going to be new SPen setting pen layout. It's basically going to handle everything for us. We just have to pass in a context, an image file if there is one for the string. In this situation there isn't, and then SPen view layout, which is this guy right here, this relative layout. Of course, we want to handle if something goes wrong with this. So if this is equal to null, we're going to make ourselves another toast. So let's just copy this, paste that in there, get rid of this. Say something like cannot create new pen setting view, and then everything else can stay the same, and we can kill the application with finish again. Tab that in so it's a little bit easier to see. Then we just want to add our pen setting view to our frame layout since we know that it is set up. So to do that, we're going to call spen view container, which is the frame layout, and call add view, and then pass in our setting view, and then create our drawing surface on the screen. It's basically just like Legos almost. You just slap all the different pieces together. And then it's basically your job to have them communicate in whatever way you want them to communicate. spen surface view, pass it to context, and there it is. It handles everything else for you. Then we need to check if the surface has been created. So if, and then come in here, grab this guy, paste it in there, and just check if it's null. And if it is, what are we going to do? We're going to print out another toast. We're going to create new spen view. Everything else is fine. Everything else is fine. Now that we have that surface view all set up, we just need to insert it into our relative layout, which we're just going to call the relative layout with spen view layout, and then add view spen surface view pops up there, and then call pen setting to set the canvas view, pass it spen surface view. Then we're going to have to get some information in regards to our display that we're going to be working with, which get window manager, get default display. Have to create a rect, which is going to store the integer coordinates for this display, and then call display and get the rectangular coordinates and store them in the rect. Now we have to try to create a NoteDoc, and we're going to do this inside of a try block as well. spen NoteDoc. Remember, the NoteDoc is going to hold all the pages. The pages are going to hold all the objects. So new spen NoteDoc, pass in the context, get the width for our display, as well as getting the height. Now that we have that, catch an IO exception if it would be triggered, and then we're going to throw in another toast to alert the user that something went wrong. Print a stack trace as well as kill the application. Cannot, let's just say initialize NoteDoc. Good enough. Everything else is fine. Make sure to change that to E, which is what comes in there. Otherwise, we're going to catch a general exception, or catch all general exceptions, and just print out the stack trace and finish to kill the application. If we didn't have any problem, we're going to add our page to our document. spen page doc, call NoteDoc, and append page. Pretty easy. Set our background color for our page document. Set background color, there it is. And I'm just going to use this generic thing that we were provided with. Good enough. Scroll that up a little bit. Clear our undo and redo history. This is a little bit of foreshadowing on what's coming in the next part of the tutorial, which is a more elaborate paint application. Put the spen document inside of our current view by calling set page doc from the surface view. And there it goes. And will it update? Yes. And there we go. Then we're going to call a method that we're going to actually create below here in a couple seconds. Actually, let's create it right now just so nobody's confused. So bounce down here and go private, void, doesn't return anything. Come inside of here. And basically what we're going to do is just set the initial pen settings for our pen application. So we'll just call spen setting pen info. Let's call this pen info is equal to new spen setting pen info. This is going to store all the settings for the pen, of course, just like the name sort of implies. And then to set everything for the pen, get this guy, paste it in there. If we want to set the color, we just call color and then go color. And let's say we want it to be blue, and there it is. Now it's blue. And if we want to also set the size to 10, that's all I need to do. There it is. It's done. And then we just need to make a reference to the spen surface view so that it knows about these new settings. Set pen setting info and pass in the pen info. And there it is. Now the surface view that handles drawing with the finger in the spen is well aware of what's going on. And then we're also going to set the settings for the settings view by calling pen setting view, set info, and pen info is passed. And there we go. And everything's set up. So the pen has defaults as well as the surface view knows what type of pen to use stroke-wise, as well as the settings view also knows. So that's pretty easy. Now I need to actually make a reference to the method it's going to be called whenever there are any color changes or any changes in general to our pen. So set color picker listener M color picker listener is referenced. So I'm going to bounce down here and create that as well to handle what happens whenever a color's changed for our pen, or pretty much anything's changed for our pen. We're just going to go private, paste that in there, change this to S pen color picker listener, which is what it is. Paste that in there and define everything inside of here. New, do this inline, color picker listener, throw in a semicolon. It's going to say, hey, you need to add some unimplemented methods. Do that. Basically, what are we going to do whenever the color or in general any of the settings are going to be changed? Basically, just come in here and go if m pen setting view is not equal to null. We're going to get the pen info by just calling the pen setting view and then calling get info from it, because we know that's where the color would have been changed. And then we're just going to go pen info and color. And we're going to call this color because that's what this is a reference to up here. And this is actually a reference to XY position. So let's just throw those in there. XY coordinates, I mean. And then call pen setting view, set info, and pass it the pen info. Okay, so we are able to handle whenever the color is changed and what we're going to do with it. So let's bounce back up inside of onCreate again. We're going to initialize the image view for our pen icon by just referencing it. It's equal to, convert to image view, find view by ID. There it is. And then we're just going to set the method it's going to be called whenever this button is clicked or this image view is clicked. Set on click listener, and that guy's going to handle all the handling of the events when that's clicked on. So we might as well create it as well. And I'll just create it down here. Get rid of this extra space. And it's just going to be private final on click listener. There's its name. And then we'll just define it. New on click listener. Throw in the curly brace. Come down here. Put a semicolon after the curly brace. Add on unimplemented methods. There it is. Basically what's going to happen when our button is clicked on. And we're basically just going to handle visibility with this. That's what this is all about. So we're going to say if the settings view is on the screen by calling is shown. Well, if it's on the screen and the button's clicked, that means that this needs to go away. So we're going to call set visibility, and then the visibility is going to be view gone. So if it's on the screen, get rid of it. If it isn't on the screen, however, else, guess what? We want to show it. And we do that by calling set view mode, S pen, setting, pen, layout, view mode, extension, and then finally set this to visible. And there we go. And that's all we need to do. That's basically just going to open up the settings window or close the settings window. And then let's bounce back up into onCreate. Here we are. All our events are being handled, so that's great. Let's check if the S Pen is usable or not. And if it isn't, then we basically just want to set that the tool to be used on our surface view should be the finger. Surface view, set, tool, type, action, S Pen surface. View is going to be tool, finger. And set the default tool that we'll be using on this surface view as just a regular stroke, like a pen stroke. And then open up a toast by calling make text. Always want to type in make toast there. I can't be the only person. The text you want to put inside of there, let's just say device doesn't support S Pen. Display it for a short period of time, then call show, and there we go. And that is everything we need to do for onCreate. The only thing left to do is handle what happens when the application is destroyed. And basically what we're going to do is just walk through the pen setting view and close it, and close the surface view, and close the NoteDoc, and close the page doc. And to do so, real simple. No point in really typing all this out. Let's get rid of that though. And you can see I'm just saying, hey, is the pen setting view not equal to null? If it isn't, close it. Is the surface view not set to null? If not, close it. So forth and so on. Same thing with the NoteDoc. So there you go. That is a whole bunch of different things you can do in Android in general, and very specifically using Samsung devices. Please leave any of your questions or comments below. Otherwise, till next time.